Good afternoon or evening already, all listeners, at least in Europe, it's almost evening. Um, Today we have quite an exciting speaker lined up, the Hacking Present that we present with CHI Belgium. Johannes will introduce our speaker later. First, I want to briefly welcome you again. My name is Dries de Roek. I am a researcher at the University of Antwerp, and I am a design researcher at the Studio Dot agency in Antwerp, Belgium. And I'm also one of the board members of CHI Belgium this year. We have been running these hangouts with interesting people for, throughout the end of before the summer, I mean. And this is our fourth installment. We had a little summer break, but now we're back in full force. What I just had a little technical issue, sorry about that. What I would like to say before Johannes takes the word is that you might have noticed on our CHI Belgium community on Google+, which you can reach through our webpage www.chibelgium.be, that we are hosting a real-life event, so you'll actually get the chance to meet the people who are watching these Hangouts. It's an event on the 4th of December. It's an evening event, and it's all about humans and the Internet of Things. We have some international speakers coming there, so it will be quite an international crowd that will be present. The reason that the event is called Humans and Things is that we want to question the role of humans or people within the Internet of Things. So going beyond the technology alone and trying to see what do we as people actually want to get out of the Internet of Things. So that's on the 4th of December in Antwerp. Make sure you check out our community on Google+, and we look forward to seeing you there. Johannes, I give the word to you.
Yes, maybe Rhys, you can say something about the Q&A and how if we want to ask questions, how to do that.
Exactly. Kind of forgot about to mention that. So during the talk of Erik Stolterman, there will be an opportunity for the audience to interact with us, or with Erik at least. We have a variety of ways of doing that. I posted them on the event page of this Hangout stream, but I will also briefly mention them here. So there is a link on the page which you can click and use to view the Hangout, and that will allow you to enable a Q&A app. And using that application, it's like part of Google Hangouts, you can post questions. That's the most convenient way. Other ways that you can reach us, should that not work, you can leave a message on the event page, just like type in your question and we will make sure that it's picked up. You can use Twitter, posting a tweet using the hashtag CHI Belgium, or there's also a possibility to leave a comment on the YouTube feed that we are using for this Hangout event. So a plethora of options. I hope we will be able to have some interaction going on between the audience and Okay, Johannes, now I definitely pass the words to you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Rhys. So on Naman in Brussels, I would like to add two events to the one that Dries, two CHI Belgium events to the one that Dries already mentioned. Those are online events. One will be a discussion, a review by attendees of Nordic, as we had previously for CHI in Toronto. So if any of you are attending Nordic CHI, please get ready to report back to this group, in the weeks following. And also, maybe excitingly for some, we got Patty Maas to commit of MIT to commit to a talk sometime in January or February. So title and exact date to be announced. The same, by the way, also for the Nordic CHI review, which will be somewhere in November. Okay, so that's Pretty okay, I think. So I'd like to introduce Erik and thank him for calling in from Bloomington, Indiana. And first of all, I'll basically read, for those who didn't take the time to do so, what his bio says on the invitation. So Erik Stolterman works at the School of Informatics and Computing at Indiana University, indeed, in Bloomington. Also a professor at the Institute of Design at Umeå in Sweden, and notably, for those who subscribe to the Interactions magazine, co-editor-in-chief for the ACM Interactions magazine. Also, editor for the Design Thinking, Design Theory book series at MIT Press. His work is definitely concerned with design in all its guises, interaction design, philosophy and theory of design, information technology and society, information systems design, philosophy of technology. It is a view of an academic on the act of design, not the profession of design, as you may say today. But he published a few books. One of them is this one, The Design Way. There's one more recent, the Thoughtful Interaction Design, which I both would recommend you to pick up and read. He also keeps a blog, Transforming Grounds, and I just quote from his most recent blog, where he says, there are some studies out there that support and argue that the idea of sticking with early ideas and working with variations of that idea is more successful than working on many parallel ideas, which is contrary to what we were led to think. So a lot of provocative thoughts about the provocative body of thought about design and what designers do. Although he also, one of his blog posts is titled "The Common Mistake of Seeing Design as a Particular Field or Profession," which we of designers, of course, find very provocative. So Erik, thank you very much for spending some time with us. So the schedule is about 20 to 30 minutes of you speaking, and then there is ample time for Q&A. And so once again, we invite you to use the various channels available to send in questions for Erik.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and it's really, first of all, fascinating to do it in this way. I think this is interesting, and of course it reduced the travel time for some of us, which is a good thing. And I hope the sound is okay. Yep, okay, good, thank you. So I thank you for that very nice presentation, Johannes. It's always sounds strange to listen to a presentation of yourself like that, but here I am, and I will do my best to, I don't know if I will provoke you today, but at least I will want to discuss something that I've seen over the years becoming more and more of a problem. And sometimes I think about it maybe not as a problem, because if you think about it as a problem, you think it can be solved. So maybe it's more like a dilemma. And so I play with this idea about how can you improve design work without destroying it. And core activity in the field of human-computer interaction and in interaction design, and when it comes to user experience and everything. And those of you who follow the research in the field, like the CHI, I know you had a discussion about the CHI conference recently, know that the field have changed for the last 5 years quite drastically, and taking a turn to design and seeing design as a major component in the field of HCI and interaction design. So while maybe before it had some grounds in psychology or in, so I'm just making that argument, that comment to make sure that it's clear that when I talk about design now, today, I do talk about design as it is practiced in the field of HCI and interaction design. So it's the professional practice of interaction designers that I'm discussing. However, I do think it applies to almost any design field, but that might be a topic for another discussion. So, first of all, it seems today like every business or every agency or every institution believe that they should adopt some kind of design thinking. Because if you do, you become better at what in some way. Design helps you to do things, and we should all be designers, and we should all think like designers. And of course, in the field of interaction design, this has been on the agenda for quite some time now, but it's still a growing understanding. And for instance, I talked to our alumni, the students that we've been producing here for the last 10, 15 years. Even though sometimes you believe that this is already, the change has happened and design is accepted, it's not always the case everywhere, but it's changing. Anyway, but there is a problem with this. There is a problem that a lot of people realize, because when you accept that design is a way of approaching how to create new technologies, how to create new applications, how to create new interactive systems, if you're going to do it in a designerly way, first of all, there is a question, what does it mean? What does it mean to approach it in a designerly way? And then the other question is, why do you do it? What is the benefits you get from it? And the third piece is more what I want to talk about, and that is, okay, let's say that there is a good reason for doing it. So there is a good reason to take a designerly approach to interaction design and HCI. If you do that, then how can you improve that? And this is where the dilemma comes in place. Well, first, a few words about why you should take a design. Why do people believe that a designerly approach is a good thing in our field? Well, first of all, you have to accept that doing things in a designerly way is a choice. It's not that you have to do it in that way. I mean, you can choose any other approach if you want to. You can choose a scientific approach. You can choose an artistic approach. You can choose an engineering approach. You can choose all kinds of approaches. Hey, you can choose a religious approach if you want to. I mean, it's possible. So whatever approach you take on this challenge of creating new interactive systems is a choice. I mean, you make a choice. And the choice is based on the idea that you believe that picking one approach instead of another gives you some benefits that you believe is valuable to you. So that's really, really important to remember. Picking design as an approach is a choice. The other thing is that for the people who do already know design and are engaged in design, it has become more and more obvious over the years that design itself is a disciplined practice. A lot of people who don't necessarily understand design or haven't worked with design, they don't see it as a disciplined practice. And actually, a lot of designers themselves have a problem with the notion of discipline. And the reason for this is when you ask someone what is design, and you want to get they come up with these descriptions that are unfortunate in many ways, because they say, well, it's not as rational or logical as, say, a scientific approach, and it's not so step-by-step organized, structured, maybe as an engineering approach. So what's left is that design becomes this approach that is non-structured, irrational, no one really knows what it is, and it seems like anything goes. That's a problem. That's a problem because if you do understand a more designerly way of doing things, you do understand that it is it requires a disciplined way of working. It requires a designerly logic. It requires a designerly rigorous way of doing things. So why do people still want to do this? Well, it's because this approach, design as an approach, delivers unique outcomes. I mean, that's the whole idea. And what are the outcomes? Well, it's that it can help us to create new things, innovative things, things that we haven't thought about before. It seems like everybody accepts this notion that a designerly way of working is the way if you want to come up with some new innovative solutions. So then if you ask people, so what is the backside of that? Well, the problems with design is that it's not predictable. It's not very efficient necessarily. It's it's filled with risk. It's super risky. It demands a lot of competence and skills that is not easy to acquire. It's not that you become a designer by reading an article and applying a method. That's not really how it works. So there are all these, and another thing is you never really know in design if you have solved the problem. Design doesn't solve problems. Design changes reality. There is no way, and this is a big problem for designers usually when working with non-designerly people, that you say that, well, this is where we ended up. And maybe a client says, well, that's not what we asked for. Well, no, but we realized through the design process that the problem that was defined was not really the problem, so we went back and we rethought things, we changed the way we think about this situation, and based on that we came up with this other possible solution. So this is the design we ended up with. And that sounds very strange to people who are not in a design thinking mode, because it becomes completely unpredictable. So if you, for instance, if you're a client and you want to hire designers to help you to come up with a new interactive application of some kind, and they suddenly come up with something completely different, how do you understand that? How do you work with that as a client? It's very difficult. And this is something that a lot of designers also understand. They understand that, okay, the way we work with iteration, with prototyping and experimenting and exploring and all this, where we change both the problem and the solution at the same time through the process. And we're never really done. We just run out of time and money at some point. And there is no right or wrong solutions. They're just solutions with consequences. So a lot of people who work in this area with design and a designerly approach do understand that it's problematic to explain design, and it's problematic and it has its limits. For instance, the predictability, the risk, the efficiency, and all those things. It's very expensive. It's very, it's very complex. It requires competence. So they start to try to improve design. And this is where the whole dilemma comes into play. I call it the improvement trap. It is a trap, because what happens is that people look, even good designers sometimes look at the design process themselves and they say, you know what, we can maybe make this more efficient. Maybe we can make this more predictable. Maybe we can make it more or less person dependent, or maybe we can make it so they try to create or change the design process itself so it doesn't really have those weaknesses that a lot of people see in design. At the same time, and this is the trap, at the same time, it seems to be the case that almost all those improvements are not necessarily improvements. What they do is they change the design process into something else. And if you do enough of those improvements, you might actually end up with a design process that is not design at all anymore. It's a completely different process. It's not a designerly approach, because now it has taken on all these other things and what that from other approaches, and what that means it can't deliver anymore. So, and what is it that it can't deliver? Well, now it can't deliver these unique outcomes, these new innovative outcomes that surprise people and make people fascinated by these new possibilities. Because if you restrict the design process so it becomes a non-design process, then of course it can't deliver the outcomes that the design process has kind of over time developed to be very good at delivering. And just to take some examples, this can happen in any field. So if we take art, for instance, in art, we do know that most people accept the artistic approach as a way of creating highly personal artistic expressions about the world or about our reality. Okay, but what's problematic with the artistic approach? Well, first of all, it's so slow. It's very person dependent, which, okay, let's take an efficiency perspective on art here. That means that art is very difficult to manage. You never really know when this artist will actually produce a piece of art. So what you want to do is you want to make art more efficient and less person dependent. So let's instead of having one artist that creates these personal expressions about reality, let's hire 10 who do the same thing. So now we have 10 different people who create the same kind of artistic expressions, the art pieces. If you think about that, almost everyone, even if they don't understand art, would say, well, that's crazy. That's actually completely wrong. You can't do that. If you do that, then it's not art anymore. Now it's something completely different. It's a process that is kind of streamlined. People have to do the same thing. Of course, it is now, which was the purpose. It's person independent and it's efficient and fast. But at the same time, most people will argue, well, it's not art anymore, and the outcome will not be considered to be art. So this is the same thing, or you can take another example with science, which is the opposite actually. If you take science as the example and you say, well, science is a great approach to create really stable truths about reality, and it does that based on, but again, it's also a very slow and difficult process, and it has to be, well, we all know it's person independent, so it's obvious, it's contrary to art that is highly person dependent, but science is person independent. That's the whole idea, because anyone who does science is supposed to come up with the same kind of result. So why not just make science a little bit more efficient? Why not have the people who want certain results pay individual scientists to come up with the results that they are looking for? That would be much more efficient. I mean, it just sounds so crazy, so we wouldn't even consider that idea, even though we have those examples from, let's say, the tobacco industry have paid a lot of interesting studies about smoking over the years. We all know that. And everybody says that's not valid research. That's not the way it can be done. So there are some intrinsic properties, intrinsic values of these different approaches that cannot really be changed. Because if you do change them, you lose the whole purpose with that particular approach. So that's the simple kind of reasoning here. A particular approach has developed over time because it can deliver a particular kind of outcomes. So working in a designerly way, with whatever that means, but in a broad sense, the way that it has developed over the years with architects, product designers, all kinds of other designers, and now in interaction design and HCI. Working in a designerly way makes it possible for people to produce these outcomes that we are looking for today. Okay? But if we manipulate that process with the idea of improving it, we have to be very, very careful. You have to be very, very careful. It's extremely easy to manipulate the process for improvement purposes that actually makes the process less probable in delivering the kind of outcomes that you would like to see. This is what I call it's a dilemma. So what do you do? Well, either you have to accept that if you want to work in a designerly fashion, it means that you have to accept some of the intrinsic characters of doing work in a designerly way. You have to accept those. You can't, because those are the ones that you can't manipulate. If you manipulate them, you destroy the process. So then the question is, so what can we do as a field? Is it impossible to improve design? I mean, that sounds strange and doesn't really sound reasonable. No, of course not. Of course it is possible to improve design. But again, you have to be very careful, and you have to think about what it is you're trying to do. It's obvious that you can be better at design or worse than, because we do see some people are extremely good at it, and they constantly produce things that surprise people and show that working as a designer can deliver these wonderful outcomes. So it's not that it's not possible to become better at it. Of course you can improve the process and become better at it. But the question is, or the challenge is, for our field to not be seduced by improvement attempts that sounds obvious and reasonable. And to me, improvements attempts like that are requests for a more straightforward process, maybe requests for more predictability, requests for more, let's say, competence-independent procedures. So you can take anyone and put anyone in the process and they will deliver. So in the belief that you can streamline the process to such an extent so you can put an inexperienced or an experienced designer in the process and they would both deliver the same thing. So there are a lot of these very tempting, very seductive improvement ideas that a lot of people today are engaged with. I mean, another one is, well, what if we just create the best possible tool for a designer? If we can create tools that forces people to become good designers so they can't escape it, if we just come up with a wonderful design tools, then it doesn't really matter if they understand design or not. Or maybe we want to come up with these wonderful design methods or wonderful design management thinking or all these. I mean, there are so many of these, and some of them are fine. So when are they fine and when are they dangerous? Well, to me, they are fine as long as they respect and understand the fundamental nature of design. So if they respect and understand the fundamental nature of design, that is, what is it that design really has to consist of to be able to be truly a design approach and truly deliver these new innovative ideas that we're looking for. If we have that respect and that understanding, then of course we can play with improvements. We can try to come up with new ways of doing things. We can try new methods. We can try new tools. But if the improvements is based on a non-existing understanding of design, then it's quite, well, I use the word dangerous. Of course, it's not dangerous in any kind of lethal way. It's just dangerous because the results will not be very good. And this happens everywhere. That's why I'm talking about this. This happens. What I'm talking about, this manipulation or ambition to improve design that leads to dangerous changes, happens today almost everywhere, in so many companies, in so many teams, in so many practice-oriented contexts. It's everywhere. And when I talk to people, I can see it, I can hear it. There are so many examples of this where people who do not understand and respect the core nature of design, they are upset with the way people do it, because it doesn't look structured, it doesn't look efficient, it's not predictable, it's expensive, so they want to change it. And of course they change it in a way that removes some of those core qualities of the design process. And then it doesn't deliver, and now they're even more upset. Because now they have made it more, tried to make it more efficient, tried to make it more predictable, and it doesn't deliver any new exciting designs. It just delivers boring, mediocre solutions that anyone could come up with. And then they ask why, and then they say, well, this whole designerly thing is not really working for us. It's not really the approach that helps us. And that is a dilemma. And I can see it in so many places today, unfortunately. And that's also why sometimes I'm a little concerned with, there will be some, and this I think people in our field should be really concerned about. There is a risk for a backlash when it comes to this idea about designerly approaches or design thinking, where a lot of people will try it, they will manipulate it without understanding it. It's not going to deliver what they want, and they're going to throw it away and say that didn't work. And then what is the alternative? What do we do then? I mean, that's the question for everyone who is a professional in this field today. What do we do then? What way is it going to take? What will the direction be? So that means that, to me, the core way, let's say the way forward here is really to become more focused or concerned with understanding the true nature of design as an approach for action and innovative, creative work. Because if you don't necessarily understand what are the core elements in that process, what are the core elements in design thinking and design processes, if you don't understand those, you will make these mistakes that I've been talking about. So strangely enough, to me, not strange, but you can then argue that if you want to do work to improve design, the best thing you can do to improve design today is not necessarily to try to manipulate the process, but to create a better understanding of the process. And I would like to see more people focusing on that part, the understanding part of what is it that makes design unique, instead of focusing on coming up with improved ways of changing the process. All right, I don't know. I mean, I can go on and talk about this forever, but maybe that's about half an hour or so. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Dries, did you get questions online?
I can't hear you.
So far, I haven't received questions from the group, but I saw that Johannes posted a question, so maybe Johannes, you can start, and while the live stream catches up, we can maybe take some questions after Johannes' question.
Yeah. Well, I think many people in the audience who are from industry. That is not necessarily industry as an industrial design, but in the design industry and working for clients who predictability to some degree. They know there's risk associated with design, and surprises and originality are not guaranteed. They want excellent execution, and they want to have a design deliver it on time, on budget, and on spec. Although the specification, that's the nature of design, you don't know exactly what you're going to deliver. But they want to be they want a process to be followed, and they want good execution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way you discuss designally, maybe you should explain exactly what you mean by designally afterwards. But it's either it is designally and it is original and it is, you use the words exciting or non-boring, right? And creative, and on the other hand, it is, it's not really design. It's very binary.
Yeah.
The way that you presented, and I'm sure you want to put some more nuance in it. But that's the way that's, as you provoked us, that's the way I would rephrase what you just said.
Yeah, that's a good comment. Of course, I mean, when I talk like this, of course, I do make some kind of a very simplistic distinctions between things just to make the argument more clear. So it's of course not the case that a designerly approach, and to me a designerly approach, if I just make a quick definition of what I mean with a designerly approach. A designerly approach is the approach that we take or humans use when they want to come up with something that is not yet existing. So it's, if you want to produce something and you already know what it is, it's just a matter of creating it in a little bit of a variation or in a better, maybe improve it in some way. It always has some kind of design challenge to it, but it's probably mostly not a design challenge. It might be something else. And the designerly approach to me is the approach where you start out with a situation, maybe a problem, but it's not, during the process you realize that the problem is not necessarily what we thought it was, but during the process the solution changes constantly, the problems changes constantly, and the idea of what you need to do next changes constantly. So there is this kind of very strange, non-linear dynamic between the situation and the problem on one hand, the solution and the final design on the other hand, and the process on the third. And they all influence each other. So that's why it's so difficult for designers to, in advance, say what they're going to do. The process, the design process, is this very dynamic, complex process that unfolds when you get to deep dive into the situation and the people and the limitations and everything that you have to deal with. The process unfolds very the only thing you can do, and this is what designers do, of course, you can describe the process on a high level, and you can talk about, well, first we have the phase where we need to understand the problem, and then we have the phase when we come up with some initial ideas, and then we have the phase where we do more detailed design. Of course, I mean, and that's correct on some very abstract level, but we all know at any time in this process, suddenly it can jump back and almost to the beginning, and you start to reframe the whole problem, and it takes a completely different way. So that is, to me, the designerly approach. Is this approach where you, in a dynamic way, work between the problem, the solution, and the process, and they define each other in a way that almost no other process really does. So, and then I just see a question here from someone who says, is a designerly approach then defined by its outcomes? Well, yes, to some extent, because I think most people believe, or at least see, that design is what they reach for when they know that they have to deliver something that they don't know what it is. As soon as you do know already in the beginning what you're going for, what it is you need, it's not necessarily, most designers would say, and I take this example all the time, if you're a web designer and you go to a client and they tell you, I want you to design my website. And you say, okay, so let's talk about it. Well, here is how I want it to look like. And they give you a sketch with all the functionality and everything. And of course, the designer will say, yeah, well, okay, all right. Then I'm done, basically. It's not really a design project. You just need someone who can build this for you, who can implement this and maybe refine it a little bit. But it's not really for me, because that's not what I do. That's not, and this is, of course, we know that a lot of designers do this kind of work because you get paid, it pays your bills. So you do this kind of work, but you're also at the same time very frustrated with the fact that you're not allowed to do, let's say, real design work. So what you do is you kind of end up with doing more of production work, which is fine, but it's a different thing. It doesn't really look for that client with that website is not looking for something innovating and new. They already know what they want. Of course, we know that what good designers do is they challenge the client and say, is this really what you want? Maybe we should change it this way, and they start to redesign the solution, which also means that suddenly the client has to redesign what they thought were the problem. So it starts that, then this dynamic process starts. So this is why, to me, this notion of improving the design process is so difficult. But because what is it that the process really does? How does the process evolve over time? And you have to be very careful again, not to make changes or remove aspects of the design process that leaves something that is not a design process anymore. Because then you would probably be better off using another approach.
There's a question on that I just selected, which might follow up on that, I think.
Okay.
Should we then de-optimize the design process? To say, like, good designers, I think that's what Yo de Graaf, who asked the question, means. Like, a client already knows, and a good designer would question, is it really what you had in mind? Could that then be defined as de-optimizing a design process, or how do you see that?
That's a very good concept. I like the idea. I don't really know what it means, but I like it. Well, no, I don't think so. Actually, to me, and again, I go back to this what I mentioned before. Of course, there are designers who are better designers than others. Okay, so there's obviously a way where you can improve the design process to produce the kind of outcomes that you're looking for in a way that is better, maybe even more efficient, maybe faster, maybe less risky. I mean, that's why very good designers are very well paid, or very good design companies are well paid, or at least should be. That's because they can deliver something that others can't. If that was not the case, then this whole discussion would be kind of, yeah, we wouldn't even have to have it. So of course we can optimize design, and I don't have a problem with the notion of optimize here. Of course we can optimize design. So what does it mean to optimize design? Well, for me, one of the core aspects of optimizing design is to optimize the judgment ability of the individual designer. So we do know that to handle this very dynamic and complex process that goes back and forth and doesn't really have a linear structure and everything built into it, it requires someone who has the ability to make judgment almost in every moment during that process. If this is the way to go, this way to go, should we go this way, should we do this, should we do that? And there are no right or wrong answers to those questions. There are only judgment that has to be made. And we do know from design research that experienced and highly skilled designers, what distinguishes them from less experienced designers is their ability to make judgments. They make judgment about design quality. They make judgment about the quality of ideas. They make judgment about who to ask and who to talk to. They make judgment about if this is a direction forward in this process or not. They make a good judgment about should we work on prototypes now or should we do more user research? Should we do this or should we do that? That's exactly the kind of judgment that a good designer can do or have the ability to do. So if we want to optimize design, we should find ways to optimize the judgment ability that every designer should have. And of course, there are work about it, and we do know. I mean, maybe you've heard of someone like Donald Schoen, for instance, who is a famous design researcher, have written a lot of books on how to improve design judgment. And it's something that can be trained. You can train your design judgment. I mean, the whole notion of apprenticeship in the old days, where you as a young designer were an apprentice with a master designer, was built on the idea that by being close to a master designer, you would over time kind of get or transfer that judgment ability from the master to the student. I mean, that was the whole purpose with apprenticeship. It was the ability to make judgments. And you saw it in action. It was not a theoretical learning process. It was theory, of course, combined with seeing judgment in action. You have to see judgment in action. That's a way to optimize design, in my view.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Maybe one question that came up in my own head at that point, and going back to what you mentioned about the master and the
apprentice
from the old days. Like, what's the importance of a design team at that point? Should there always be someone who has the ability to make the judgment, or are there multiple people who can make judgments at the same time?
Well, that's a great question, and we do know from design that, of course, design today, we do know that no one can have the ability to make judgment about everything in a design process. In our field, no one knows everything about technology. No one knows everything about people or the context or the problem, and no one knows all this. So what we do is we put together teams with a specific purpose to build a collective judgment ability. I mean, that's the whole idea with the team. So when you put the team together, and this is also where some people have problems and do it wrongly, they do think about this as either as a democratic thing or as an expert thing. So if you take the expert route in a team, it means that you let always the expert in the particular area where you have to make a judgment, make the judgment, and the other guys in the team just go with that. And the other one is you let everybody vote on everything, so judgment becomes a voting thing in a team. And I think most of us have had experiences of both of those extremes, and none of them work well. So what you try to do in a design team is you really try to make the team function as one entity, so that the judgment made by the team is this kind of very complex emerging understanding that leads to a team judgment. And this is, of course, extremely difficult. And again, that's why we do know that if to have a good team leader is so important, it can't be stressed enough. Because what a team leader can do is to be able to design that team, to have that team judgment ability, instead of having individuals who do their own thing, and then you have meetings and you argue and then you go back. I mean, that's another way of doing it, but that's not necessarily the designerly way of doing it.
Okay. There is one other question that has come in, and I have to probably interpret it a little bit. It's by another question by Vero. I presume that she's referring to, but the question is, but how does it work? And I asked him, I presume she's referring to the core values that you talked about of the design process. Like, what are the core values, I think?
Well, to me, understanding design is, first of all, it's a question of being humble. You have to, most of us have to accept that we don't necessarily understand how this approach works in detail, and what are the crucial elements in the process, and what are just maybe traditions. Because a lot of the things that designers do are not necessarily the crucial elements of design. They might just be cultural heritage traditions that have developed, and that people say it's important and it's core to design, but it may not. So in this case, I would say the way to do it is, actually I would answer like this. There is a lot of really, really good research today about design. There's a lot of good research on what designers do, how designers think, and there are many books about this, that if you take them together, they don't necessarily present a super simple picture of the design process, but if you look at them on kind of an overall perspective, they do give you a fairly good understanding of what is it that people who are professional designers, what is it that they see as the core elements of design, or designing. So this research is out there, and I mean, people who have done this work is not, for instance, there are great books by, like I mentioned, Donald Schoen, Nigel Cross, Klaus Krippendorf. I mean, there are a whole bunch of people who have done really wonderful work on this. So we do know, I would argue, it's not that we don't know the design process, so we don't know how designers work and think. There is a lot of work, and we do know a lot of that already. But unfortunately, that knowledge is not necessarily known in the industry to the extent that I think it should be, because it does give anyone who struggles in, let's say an industrial context, with people not understanding what design is. Instead of trying to come up with your own very maybe intuitive definition of what design is, there is a lot of really good descriptions out there. It's pretty straightforward, simple, that also make this case from a based on research. So there is actually research behind this on what is it that are the core elements of a design process.
Okay. Thanks. As far as I can see, there are no more questions at this moment. Johannes, would you like to ask a question still, or do we round up?
Yeah, well, I don't have a particular question, but I think what you are not trying to say, Erik, is that we should lose process and that we should become less efficient. Basically, what you are saying is that we should, as designers, take ourselves very seriously. I mean, take our process seriously, and if we want to improve, to look first to our own competences, which will mean that not everybody can be a good designer, right? But that we must try to improve the process, but do it as we progress in projects, and not have a preset process lined out at the beginning of the project and then be very rigid about it, because that would not lead to appropriate decision making. Does that sort of sum up a compromise between what you are saying and what we from industry would tend to think? Does that make sense, what I just said?
Yes, that makes sense. I don't see it as a compromise, though, necessarily. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, what I'm saying is not, I truly like what you said first, that we should take our process serious. I think that is really the core of what I'm talking about. Because if you believe, if people in this industry believe, those who do it in a particular way, specifically in a more design way, if they take their process seriously and try to formulate the process, try to come up with a way of describing that process, and not try to pretend that it's something else. I see so many times designers who try to sell their process by packaging it in some format that maybe a client would understand or like. And I can say, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, you can do that. But if you do it and you also start to use that more packaged format of your process, then you're moving in a very dangerous direction, because after a while you will not be able to deliver the kind of outcomes that people are actually looking for. And then they think, well, we can do that ourselves. So to me, from a competitive point of view, it's extremely important to take the process seriously and be able to do what other people can't do, because there is this unique process. Because if you don't, if you try to change the process so it becomes something that people recognize and can do, then they think they can do it themselves. And it also means that you are not going to be able to deliver. So to me, this is this is what I mentioned in the beginning as the concern I have about the backlash. That if people who do and say they do designerly work in this industry today, and if they don't and are not successful, it's going to be thrown out in a few years. If you can't deliver something that people are willing to pay for, then it's not going to be sustainable. So that's why you have to take the process seriously. Because it is the way you do things that is the unique thing. It's not that you're extra smart than other people in the business, or it's the way you approach a problem, a situation, and the way you come up with a solution and a design. That's the competence. That is the competence that you're selling.
Okay. Dries, I would like to close with this. Thank you very much, Erik, for being with us, and wish you a pleasant afternoon. And we'll we'll stay in touch, no doubt. Belgium and Indiana, one way or another. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.